Guys, got a question for you. To this point, is Ohio State underperforming right now at this point? I understand, hey, they've only lost one game. It was to the number one team in the country, I believe, which is Oregon, right? They've lost by 1 point, very questionable, whatever have you. If there's one thing you've learned at this point about Ohio State, it is that they always seem to lose games and blame refs, or they always try to blame everybody else, or there's a controversial thing, right? At the end of the day, go look back at the last 2 years alone. And what I want to kind of point out is, if you look, this year they play Oregon, right? Lose by 1 point. That's a top 5 team there, top 3 team. Let's go back to last year here for the top. This is the top 10 teams. They beat Notre Dame last year by 3 points on the road at Notre Dame. Okay. Penn State beat it by 8 points at home. All right. Michigan lost that game there. Missouri in the bowl game. Now I understand, hey, a lot of people opted out, people were hurt, this, that, the other, whatever. It's still lost 14-3 against Missouri. What is Ohio State's record been against the SEC? What have they done when they play anybody that's worth a fuck? That's the question that I have.
Yeah, no, if you don't mind, no, they can't beat anybody from the SEC. They struggle against top 10 teams. I mean, that's the reality of it when you're the Ohio State man. Christian, they spent $20 million on this roster. $20 million for a team this year, and we can look at the schedule. You can say what you want. I don't give a shit about Akron, Western Michigan, Marshall. I don't. You beat Michigan State, fine. They've gotten better over time. You beat Iowa. Yeah, okay. But the Oregon game, I'm not going to knock them necessarily for the Oregon game. That was a very good football game, both sides. Now, obviously, I'm a Nebraska fan, and I watched every play of that game. I couldn't believe how inept they look on offense. Now, I do know Nebraska has a physical defense. They do. So does Oregon. So is that maybe the question, Christian, is Ohio State getting a little soft against some of these more physical teams? Nebraska is a physical team, especially on defense. Now, I did watch it, like I said. I wasn't impressed with Will Howard, dude. We said that, I believe, before the year started. Was Kyle McCord really the problem last year? I mean, they ran him out of town for going 11-1. Now, I know he didn't play well against Pitt the other night, but he's also playing with a bunch of no-names for receivers, basically, in a team that's, not near as equipped as Ohio State when you got Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson, Emeka Ibuka, Tate, obviously our boy Jeremiah Smith. I mean, they got too many weapons to only score 21 points against Nebraska is what I'm getting at here. I don't think Will Howard – I'm just not impressed. I'm not. Can this team still get it done this year? They're going to have to play a lot better offensively, Christian, because it's been kind of a problem.
No, I agree with you. And I think to your point, I mean, they spent all that money. I mean, you spend that money, you shouldn't lose to Oregon. You know what I mean? You spend all that money, you shouldn't barely beat Nebraska, which I'm not going to knock Nebraska in that one. I think that's more about Nebraska playing up than it is about, and it's probably a combination too about Ohio State playing down. But the problem is, like, you look last year, a team that didn't spend $20 million on their roster, and that was Michigan. Now, I know Ohio State fans are going to say they cheated their way through it, and I totally agree with you. That is what it is. They still beat the dog shit out of Nebraska last year. You know what I mean? And so, like, that's kind of what I'm looking for. Not to leave these games into question. Can you beat somebody who's good, you know what I mean, and try to beat them by more than 5.8 points, which is the average margin of victory they've had when they play a team in the top 10? You know what I mean? Whether they win or they lose. So can you put something together? I mean, all these pieces you bring in offensively, you would think that you would maybe see some scores like, I don't know, the Marshall or the Western Michigan or, the Akron scores. You would start to see some of those kind of things going forward when you play in Iowa, when you play a Michigan State. And I get it. They beat them 38-7, 35-7. But, when you spend that much money, you have all this talent on both sides of the ball. You bring in Chip Kelly to be your offensive coordinator to help sort of unfix or unmess up some of these things that have been messed up over the last couple of years since CJ Stroud's been on the sidelines. What's going on? And Chris, go ahead.
No, but you alluded to it, and going forward with not Penn State, but Ohio State this year, they got a big game looming this weekend against Penn State. They lose that, there's a potential thing where they could go 10-2, hell, maybe 9-3 with losing to Indiana. I'm just saying, if you're Ohio State, man, you got to be. I mean, this is DEFCON 5, I think, for the rest of the season in this team, especially when you go out and have this amount of talent on a roster, Christian. And to me, so far, they haven't lived up to it. I mean, I know people are going to say we lost to Oregon by 1 point. Okay, on the road. Okay, but the Nebraska game, they just haven't looked like I don't know, man. We watched Georgia in years past. We watched the elite Alabama teams play. Let's be honest. Michigan was an elite team. They were great last year. They played like one close game the entire year, essentially. Ohio State's been playing some close ones late, and it just doesn't look like it's clicking, man. I mean, just in my opinion, with that amount of talent.
No, you're 100% right. And Chris, I want to kind of open the debate up for you. If they lose to Penn State, if God forbid they lose to Penn State on Saturday, is that the end for Ryan Day?
Ooh, is it the end for Ryan Day? Man, I don't know, but I will say if they do lose to Penn State, Christian, they're not making probably the 12th. I mean, they might sneak in maybe a 12-team playoff, but they're not going to the Big Ten title game because if you look at Penn State and Oregon's going to win out the rest of their games. So they're a lock for the Big Ten title game. Penn State, this is Penn State's biggest game of the year right here is Ohio State. They don't play nobody the rest of the year. Indiana's got to go play Ohio State as well yet. And you guys know Indiana's still currently undefeated at 8-0. I'm just saying, that's what I'm saying. This is DEFCON 5 if I'm an Ohio State fan right now, Christian. I'm a little worried about the Buckeyes.